I want to see if I can get under here with my scalpel. You can see the distortion in that leather, that leather is quite thin. It's not exactly peeling off nicely. It's not uncommon that the leather comes loose at the end like that, and somebody may have previously glued it back. Well, depending on what they chose to glue it with, it could make a big difference on your potential success rate at getting the leather off nicely. Here it's glued back over chromic brass. Back here it's glued back over aluminium, and the adhesive will often behave differently over the different metals. Okay, let's see how this goes. I'm going to try peeling this now. Now it's not peeling as neatly as the leather at the base of the camera did. You can see it's sort of delaminating a bit there. So I may have to poke and prod at this with the scalpel as I go to cut the fibres that are sticking so it doesn't tear. Yeah, you can see those ice bumps coming into view there. That green waxy crap. Sure, one of you people out there is probably a chemist and you could tell me what that is. It's present where there are dissimilar metals, probably moisture, and whatever residual chemicals are left in the leather after the tanning process. It's very difficult to make those ice bumps entirely disappear. Once leather's stretched, it's not very elastic. It doesn't want to return to its original shape. It would have been fine when it was still on the animal, but they parted company 70 years ago. But troublesome though this is, you get a much better result than if you were using there was leatherette on here. Now you can see from the colour here that the light parts, that's fibres of leather still stuck to the adhesive. And here the darker parts, that's where the adhesive is stuck to the leather that come away from the camera. I've got a little distance to go back to get to that corner. That's as far as I'm going. There's another Zeiss bump under here where the rivets are. That'll do. I could go the rest of the way, try and get it off so that I could get at those bumps under the leather there where they're over the screws, or the rivets actually, but the leather is going to be quite thin there. It's likely been skived at the ends. That's where the leather has been thinned out from the back. It means it's more fragile. It's much more likely to rip when you're trying to get off a thinned area like there, and the same on the front here too. I'm going to leave those bumps in place. The chance of getting the leather off easily enough and in one piece, well, the chance of getting it off in one piece is the problem. I'm not so concerned about how easy it is. I just want to be able to, I need to be sure that I can actually achieve my target. If I'm not sure I can achieve my target, I'm better not to do anything about it, because it'll look a lot worse if I tear the leather or make some other mess of it. Anyway, back here, Zeiss bumps. What do we got? This green stuff here. That's all got to come off, and you'll hear various ideas about covering the metal with lacquer to stop it contacting, you know, the leather again and things like that, but honestly the adhesive will do that for you. You don't need to go to other extreme measures. The adhesive will do all of that for you. So I'm just using some naphtha here to dissolve that rubbish, lift it out of those rivets. And you can see green dot here, here, and here, here. There's probably one under here. Yeah, there is. Here. There'll be two more there. One there. Is there only two washed rivets on that? Or three? Oh, two. Okay. So all of that I just need to clean down. Likewise I need to clean the leather, and where it's, get rid of it all from here, and if there's adhesive still stuck on those two spots, clear that too, because that'll be inflexible and it won't want to lie down flat. Yeah, where the spots of adhesive on here, often that's because that there is corrosion underneath them, so they'll let go of the metal. Alright, that looks okay. Now the missing paint on the back of this camera is very, very even. It doesn't look out of place, and I'm not going to repaint that. I'm going to leave it exactly as it came. doesn't look out of place at all. You wouldn't pick that there was anything unusual about that. If it's patchy, then you've got to do something about it. Either put it all back or take it all off. Right, cleaning up this stuff. Well, things have moved on. The leather is back on the back of the camera there. You can see that the very prominent Zeiss bumps that were on the back are now gone. There's still marks on the leather here and here, but those marks are very much reduced from what they were. There's no hump there anymore. There's possibly a slight divot in the leather. Caught with the raking light from the window here, you can see them, but generally speaking there's nothing to feel there. You can run your thumb over them, there's nothing to feel. The bumps I'm leaving here because, as I said, the leather's too thin to make that worthwhile chasing those. The Zeiss bump that was here at that point there, that's gone, it's been removed. I lifted the corner of that leather, peeled it back, scraped out the rubbish, put it back. There's nothing here to chase, so they won't be chasing anything. And now I'm ready to start putting things back together. The struts are all clean now. It was very difficult getting the old grease off. It wouldn't really dissolve with the naphtha at all. It had gone past that stage of being a lubricant anymore. It was just a lacquer. And it shifted quite well with the CRC Lectraclean with a bit of work, but the naphtha really didn't make much of a dent on it at all. There was some slight bending of the struts, very minor, and quickly sorted out. But the struts are good, and that's ready to go back in the camera. What else have I done in the meantime? Well, of course, everything else has been cleaned, and the parts are back from the ultrasonic cleaner. The focus helical, that's nice and clean, that's moving very smoothly now. As with the struts, that grease that was in there had left like a lacquer-like layer on the some of those threads. That didn't come out in the ultrasonic cleaner, but it did come out using the CRC Heavy Duty Lectraclean. Spraying some of that on there and working it backwards and forwards loosened that stuff up. So the focus helical moves nice and smoothly here, or at least the inner moves nice and smoothly in the outer. Focus mounts all been cleaned. This is a die casting of some sort, injection high pressure die casting, I think, by the looks of it. Often these are slightly distorted. The alloy ones tended to distort more frequently. They used to use brass in the very early days, and what that means is that sometimes you end up with distortion in this piece and you have a great difficulty in getting this piece to revolve smoothly in it. That doesn't appear to be the case here. I think that's moving quite smoothly now. Here, certainly there's an element of drag there, but nothing untoward. And once that's lubricated, that'll probably be good. So I'll need to start on this reassembly process. Well, I'll start with the body. Now I'm just going to rub a bit of molybdenum paste onto that guide post for the shutter release mechanism. Doesn't need much. Here's the shaft that transfers the action from the cocking rack at the back of the camera through towards the front of the camera, where the other piece that mates with this will then mate with the curved rack. So I'll fit this into place. That just sits up in there. There's a little bracket that holds that in position. I'll get that in position. There's a spring, return spring for the shutter release mechanism goes on here. I'll get that in position. Now bring these struts back in. These marks that are left on the front, you can see those quite clearly. There's scars and scratch marks from this piece because this piece was floating. Basically, this was allowed to push back against here because the mount wasn't being held firmly in front. And those are just rub marks. It's rubbed right through the chrome in those points. There's not serious damage, and largely of course it's hidden by the ring, so that's not going to go anywhere. I'll take some molybdenum paste, just run it on the shaft here where the shutter release runs. I'll run some down that edge. That's all moving smoothly. This is all very clean. This I just cleaned by hand. That didn't go through the ultrasonic cleaner, but you wouldn't know it because it's very clean. I'll run some synthetic grease in the slots at the back here, top and bottom, but I won't put any in the front slots yet because there's a high likelihood I'll just end up rubbing it off on my fingers as I put this together. So I've got to get this onto the shaft like that, squeezing these struts in, hopefully not dislodging that bracket at the top. It held the shaft in place. It looks like it's good. There are 4 screws, 4 black screws we need. One of them is incredibly ugly, that's probably from the base of the camera, and I'll check the other 3, and the 2 prettiest need to go into the film cassette well. The other one is never going to be seen really up at the top, so we'll put that up here. We'll get that single screw in place. At the base of the camera there's a spacer washer that goes in between the struts and the body in the same relative position as that bracket did at the top of the camera. So I've got to squeeze that into place. Of course, as usual, things aren't playing the game. So I'll get it against the bracket in there, lift the bracket and allow that washer to drop down in place. It's dropped. I'm looking in from underneath, from the front here now. I can see where that washer lies relative to the hole, and it's right there. And I can put the screw in. Get that started. I don't need to tighten it at this stage. And the 2 screws in the film cassette well here can now go in place. Again, I only need to get them in loosely until I've got all of the 4 screws here in place. Once all 4 screws are in place, then I can tighten them up, but not before. Okay, all 4 screws are in place now. I'll tighten up the 2 in the film cassette chamber. Tighten up the one at the top of the camera. Tighten up the one at the base of the camera. And the struts are all back in place. Just check that they do move. They seem to move smoothly. That looks good. And the focus mount can go on here next. So I can just find the screws for it. Of course, the focus mount was loose when we started. So I'll get the 4 screws started. And I've got my finger in underneath here supporting this while I do this, because the bellows are not fixed up in place at the moment. And the reason I've got my finger in underneath is to support this while I'm putting this screw in, so that I'm not pressing down on the struts and potentially bending them. Okay, that's all good. I'll collapse those struts and do up the 4 screws. Extend the front out again. That clicks into place. Check that that all looks good. That's fine. Let's put it back where it was and get the bellows attached. And the bellows are held in place with 4 black screws. The screws pass through the focus mount and into a plate in the front of the bellows. I'll get all 4 screws started. Because there's a layer of felt and a layer of leather between the bellows plate and the bellows in the back of this front standard, the screws don't pull up tight as they would if it was just metal in there. So don't go screwing them up and continuing to screw them up thinking they're going to lock up tight. Just do them up until they're pulling up snug. That's good. So there's the bellows firmly fixed to the back of the front standard now. And the next thing I want to do here is deal with the focus helical. Now these parts are cleaned. It's sitting here. The inner and outer are assembled together. There are the alignment marks that were on this when I got it, and I know that they were correct when the front surfaces were level. So that's good. So some helical grease. That'll be the rescue helicopter going out. Right, so put some of that in about 6 spots around the outside. I'll just rotate this backwards and forwards to spread that through the helical. That's running nice and smooth. I'll run some around the outside here where this is going to run in the mount. In the 2 spots where it runs on the posts, the guide posts for the inner helical, you can tell which ones they are because they have the little holes in them. That's okay. Now, I know which way this goes up because it's got my 2 scratch marks at the bottom there and the 1 scratch mark at the top. So that's okay, that's in place. The retainer for that, need to run some synthetic grease around it, or using the helical grease here. You could use just about anything, this works well. Just run some around that inside edge, just like that. That sits on there. We're done with that helical grease now. There are 6 countersunk head screws that hold this plate in place. I'm supporting this focus mount between finger and thumb so that I'm not pushing down on the struts. Right, I'll just collapse those struts right down, do up my 6 screws. Extend that back out. And the focus scale ring can go on here. my alignment marks that I scratched across here, and I've also got the heads, the marks from where the screws bit into this ring. So I can centre that screw mark up, check the others are centred up too. Oops, get that back on there. Yes, that looks good. And get those 4 screws in place. Do these up very lightly. If you over tighten these screws, all you'll achieve is a focus adjustment, focus mount that doesn't want to move smoothly. Because if you over tighten these, you'll end up distorting the outer helical and make it bind up. They don't require an awful lot of tightness. It's got to be lightly done up. I'm checking my focus. That's nice and smooth, but there's no rattle in it, there's no play. The rangefinder coupling on this front plate, let's get that into place. Now that front plate has another job apart from holding the rangefinder coupling. It has a fork on it which connects with the screw on the back of the shutter, and its job is to stop the shutter from rotating. It locates the shutter on the camera so that when you are cocking the shutter doesn't counter rotate. Do up these 2 screws. Again, I'm supporting the front standard between finger and thumb, not pushing down on it. And the screw at the top of the rangefinder arm here, we'll get this in place. I normally put some synthetic grease in that track. This track is where the arm stows away when the front of the camera is collapsed. You can see that this pin here moves inwards and outwards as I move the focus scale ring, and as I collapse the front of the camera, you'll see that this arm disappears away down that track. If there was nothing else there, it would be extending out the back of the camera if it didn't fold, but fortunately it does. Right, well that's pretty good. What's next?